Hello, dear ones. I'm María Elena Rodriguez. I'm 71 years old, and today I'm going to share with you the most painful yet liberating story of my life. It's a tale in which my own children abandoned me in a nursing home, treating me like a worn-out object, but which ultimately turned out to be the best gift they could give me without realizing it. Before I start, I ask you to click like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about which state you're watching us from. This really helps me to continue sharing my stories with more people who might be going through something similar. Get comfortable and grab your coffee or tea because this narration has it all. Family betrayal, tears, but also an ending you could never imagine. Sometimes life places us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand it at first. I'll tell you how at 68, when I thought my life had come to an end, it was actually just beginning. I was born here in Guadalajara, Jalisco in 1954, in a modest family from the Santa Tere neighborhood. My father, may he rest in peace, worked in a textile factory, and my mother took care of the home and looked after my 5 siblings and me. From a young age, I understood that in life, one must strive and that family is the most valuable thing. My mother always used to tell me, "My little one, in this life you can lose everything, but family will always be with you." How wrong my dear mother, who also rests in peace, was. I got married at 18 to Paul Hernandez, a good man who worked as a mechanic in a shop near Calzada Independencia. We didn't have much, but we had plenty of love and dreams. We lived in a small house that we rented in the Fresno neighborhood. I cleaned houses to help with expenses, while Raul worked hard in the shop. Our first son, Robert, was born in 1975 when I was 21 years old. Oh, what a great joy we felt. Then came my Alexander in 1977, and finally my princess, my Gabrielle, in 1980. 3 wonderful children who became the center of my world. Everything I did was for them, to give them the best, to make sure they lacked for nothing, even though we had very little. Let me tell you what my life was like back in those years. I would wake up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast, pack lunches, and organize uniforms. Then I would rush to clean houses. I had 3 regular jobs from Monday to Friday and 2 more on Saturdays. I would come home exhausted in the afternoon, but still had to help with homework, make dinner, and do the laundry. Sundays were completely dedicated to them. I would take them to the park and we would make pozole together. We would watch movies on TV. Raul was a good father. Don't get me wrong, but like many men of his time, he believed his only responsibility was to bring home the money. The rest fell to the women. So I practically raised my children on my own, working nonstop so they could study, get their school supplies and shoes, ensuring they didn't feel less than other kids. I remember well when Robert entered middle school and needed a new uniform. It was January 1988. I remember it clearly because the terrible earthquake of '85 had just happened and the economic situation was very complicated. The uniform cost about 15,000 old pesos, which at that time was a fortune for us. I worked double shifts for 2 weeks, cleaning extra houses on weekends just to be able to buy it for him. When I gave it to him, Robert barely said, "Thanks, Mom," and ran off to play with his friends. But I stood there, feeling like the happiest mother in the world, knowing my son was going to have his new uniform. Years passed like this. My children grew up, and I continued working tirelessly to give them the best. When Robert decided to study business administration at the University of Guadalajara, I sold the gold earrings Raul had given me for our anniversary, the only ones I owned, to cover his tuition. When Alexander asked for a bicycle for his 15th birthday, I worked for 3 months at a bakery at night to get it. When Gabrielle showed interest in taking English classes because she thought it was crucial for her future, I stopped buying clothes for an entire year to pay for her course. I did all of this gladly, my dears, because I believe that's what mothers should do. Sacrifice for their children, give it all for them, and live to see them happy and successful. My mother taught me that children are a lifelong commitment, and I believe that without question. It never crossed my mind that one day they could be there for me. In 1998, when Robert was already 23 and had finished his studies, he met Veronica, a young woman from a middle-class family in America. She was attractive, educated, and came from a household with more resources than ours. From the very first moment, I noticed that she looked at me with a certain disdain, as if I were beneath her. But Robert was madly in love, so I held back and tried to be the best mother-in-law possible. They got married in 2000, and of course I went into significant debt to contribute to the wedding. I pawned my gold chain, borrowed money from my sisters, and worked extra hours for 6 months to give my son a worthy ceremony. The ceremony was beautiful at the San Jose de Analco Church, and the reception took place in a very elegant hall in Chapalita. Robert looked incredible in his suit, and I felt so proud of him. However, from the moment he got married, Robert began to distance himself from us. At first, it was little things. He no longer came for Sunday lunches. It took weeks for him to return my calls. He always had commitments when I invited him. Veronica always found reasons not to visit, mentioning that she had commitments with her family, that they were too busy with their jobs, or that they needed time as a couple. In contrast, Alexander, my second son, chose to take a different path. He moved to Monterrey to study systems engineering and then stayed there working for a renowned company. In 2003, he married a woman from the mountainous region named Patricia. Although she was more understanding than Veronica, she also contributed to Alexander drifting away from his family. "Life here in Monterrey is very different, Mom," he would tell me when I urged him to come more often. "I have better opportunities and a higher salary here. I can't be traveling constantly to Guadalajara." Gabrielle, my dear princess, was the one who stayed by my side the longest. She graduated in psychology from UDG and lived at home for a while. However, in 2005, she met a doctor named Frank who worked at the civil hospital, and she fell madly in love with him. Frank was a successful man with a private clinic, and he made it clear from the start that he didn't have a good opinion of ordinary people like us. In 2006, when I was 52 years old, life dealt me the deepest blow I had ever experienced. My beloved Raul passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It was a Tuesday morning, March 14th. That date will never be erased from my memory. I was having breakfast when suddenly he clutched his chest and collapsed just before the ambulance arrived. By that time, it was already too late. I was completely alone, shattered, unsure of how to move forward. At 52 years old, I was a widow, and for the first time in my life, I had no one to guide me or tell me how to carry on. However, my children were there for the funeral. All three came, hugged me, and assured me that I didn't need to worry, that they would always be by my side. "Don't worry, Mom," Robert said to me. "We will take care of you." Alexander promised that he would send me money every month so that I wouldn't lack for anything. And Gabrielle committed to staying with me until I felt better. But promises, my dear ones, are sometimes like clouds. They look very beautiful from a distance, but when you touch them, you realize they are just air. After the funeral, each one returned to their daily routine. Robert went back to his marriage and his job at an insurance company where he already held a management position. Alexander, for his part, returned to Monterrey with his family. He already had 2 small children, my grandchildren, whom I barely knew because of the distance. Gabrielle married Frank just 6 months after her father's death. I was left alone in the little house in Fresno, surrounded by memories and living on a very small pension provided by Social Security after Raul's death. It wasn't a considerable income. It barely covered my basic needs, but I thought it would be temporary, that my children would come to my aid and would not leave me alone. At first they did, I can't lie. Robert visited me every 2 or 3 weeks and brought me groceries. Alexander sent me 2,000 pesos monthly right on time. Gabrielle called me almost daily and came to see me whenever she could. Although Frank always showed disdain whenever she announced that she would come to see me, gradually, very gradually, things began to change. Robert's visits became less frequent. "It's just that I have a lot of work, Mom," he would tell me. "Veronica says we should focus our energies on our own family." Alexander's 2,000 pesos turned into 100, and then, "This month is tough, Mom, but I'll send you double next month." By 2010, when I was already 56, my children had practically disappeared from my life. Robert appeared maybe once a month and was always in a hurry. Alexander sent me money every once in a while, but less frequently and with more excuses. And Gabrielle, my princess, now lived in a big house in Country Club, and whenever I called her, she was always busy with social commitments or meetings at the hospital. It was then that I began to notice the first signs of what was to come, although I didn't understand them at that moment. During our phone conversations, they always seemed in a rush to say goodbye. When I shared my difficulties, like that the refrigerator had broken down, that I needed to see a doctor, or that I felt very lonely, their responses were quick, and they advised me to find a way to solve it. "Mom, you're a grown woman now," I heard Gabrielle say to Frank the time I decided to visit her unexpectedly. "She needs to learn to be self-sufficient. We can't take care of solving all her problems." That comment struck me deeply, but I held on to the hope that things would change. I kept telling myself they were going through a tough time, and once their lives stabilized, they would return to being the loving children I had raised. In 2012, I was diagnosed with diabetes. They discovered the disease during a routine checkup at the health center, and the doctor warned me that I needed to take care of myself, as it was a serious condition that could lead to multiple complications if not properly managed. It required medication, a specific diet, and regular medical checkups. When I informed my children, they all expressed concern over the phone. "Oh, Mom, that's terrible," Robert said to me. However, he added that I shouldn't worry, since there are very good treatments available. Alexander committed to help me with health expenses. Gabrielle mentioned she would talk to Frank to recommend a good endocrinologist, but once again, the promises went unfulfilled. I had to learn to manage my illness on my own, with the help of the doctor at the center and the limited resources I could allocate to medication from my pension. At times, I found myself forced to choose between buying food or medicine, and I almost always opted for the medicine, even if it meant surviving for several days on nothing but tortillas and salt. The following years became increasingly difficult. My diabetes worsened, followed by hypertension and then kidney problems. I started experiencing frequent dizziness, my feet would swell, and I was overwhelmed by extreme fatigue. There were days when I couldn't even get out of bed. My neighbors, Miss Carmen and Mr. Louis, who lived next door, were the ones who truly cared for me during those years. They would take me to the doctor when I couldn't go by myself, bring me medicine when I couldn't go out, and keep me company during my toughest moments. "Don't worry, María Elena," Ms. Carmen would say to me, "We are here for whatever you need." It was ironic and very painful that people I had only known for a short time treated me with more kindness and care than my own children, whom I had raised with so much love and dedication. By 2014, as I turned 60, it was clear that my children had consciously decided to distance themselves from my life. Robert had climbed the ranks at work and was now a regional manager for an insurance company. He lived in a beautiful house in Providencia and had 2 cars, while his 2 children, my grandchildren, attended expensive private schools. But to him, I had become an inconvenience, a burden he preferred not to deal with. Alexander was still in Monterrey, now as the assistant director of systems at his company. He had also prospered. He had a spacious house, and his 3 children, whom I barely knew, I only saw through pictures he occasionally sent me on WhatsApp. And Gabrielle, my princess, had transformed into a true socialite. Frank was very successful with his clinic, and she didn't work, dedicating herself to organizing charity events and socializing with the wives of other doctors. She lived in a world completely foreign to mine, and I simply didn't fit in that environment. My 60th birthday was especially sad. None of my children came to see me. Robert sent me flowers with a card that said, "Happy birthday, Mom. How we love you so much." Alexander called me around 11 p.m. just as I was getting ready for bed, and he hurriedly sang the birthday song before hanging up since he had a very early meeting the next day. Gabrielle sent me a WhatsApp message. Happy birthday, Mommy. I'm sorry I can't make it, but Frank and I are in Cancun for a medical conference. I'll call you when I get back. That day I cried like I hadn't since Raul passed away. I realized that for my children, I was no longer a priority, but merely an uncomfortable responsibility they preferred to avoid. The following years were an endless emotional roller coaster. There were days when I felt strong and thought I could move on with my life without depending on anyone, but there were also very dark days when loneliness and illness left me completely devastated. In 2015, I experienced my first serious diabetes crisis. One morning, I woke up unable to see clearly. Everything looked blurry, and I felt so weak that I could hardly walk. Miss Carmen found me in the yard of my house, where I had gone to collect the laundry I hung out to dry. She quickly took me to the local hospital, where I was admitted for 3 days. When I informed my children of what had happened, they all expressed their concern over the phone. Robert told me he would try to visit me, but he was going through a tough time at work due to staff cuts. Alexander offered to send me money for a private hospital, but when I told him I was already in the local one and receiving good care, he didn't insist further. Gabrielle mentioned she would talk to Frank so he could refer me to an excellent specialist he knew, but nothing ever came of it. None of the three came to see me in the hospital. I was there for 3 days, terrified and unsure if I would survive. My only visitors were Ms. Carmen, Mr. Lewis, and Mrs. Hope, who lived at the corner of my street. When I left the hospital, I had an extensive list of care instructions to follow. I had to take medication at specific times, do light exercise, maintain a strict diet, and attend monthly medical checkups. The doctor was very clear in saying that I needed support, that living alone with my medical situation posed a risk. That same week, I spoke to my 3 children to explain what was happening. The doctor says I need assistance, I told them. I can't keep living alone with all these health issues. Robert mentioned that he and Veronica had discussed the matter and decided that it would be best for me to move in with one of my siblings. Our house is too small, Mom, he explained, even though he knew they had a 3-bedroom home. He added that Veronica was very stressed with her job and wouldn't be able to help take care of me. Alexander was more straightforward. Mom, the distance is a problem. If you move to Monterey, you don't know anyone, you don't have your doctors, you don't have your life. It would be complicated for everyone. Gabrielle mentioned that she had considered the option, but Frank thought it would be too complicated since they traveled often for work and couldn't provide the specialized care I needed. In summary, none of the 3 wanted to take on the responsibility of caring for me. My siblings also couldn't offer much support. My sister Rosa had been living in the United States for 20 years and was dealing with her own issues involving her teenage children. My brother Manuel had passed away from cancer in 2010. My sister Lupita had a husband with Alzheimer's and could no longer take on more responsibilities. And my younger brother Carlos lived in a small 1-bedroom house with his wife and 2 young children. Throughout 2016 and 2017, my health continued to decline. I suffered 2 minor strokes that left me very weak and developed memory problems that caused me great fear. There were several instances where Ms. Carmen found me disoriented in the street, not remembering how I got there or where I lived. Each time I experienced a medical crisis, the same pattern repeated. I would inform my children. They would express their concern over the phone. They promised to come visit me as soon as they could, but they never showed up. They always had a very valid excuse. Important work, family commitments, trips they couldn't postpone. By the end of 2017, I could no longer manage my life independently. I would forget to take my medications. I would get lost when I went out to do grocery shopping. I experienced several minor accidents at home, like dropping things or misjudging distances. Miss Carmen and Mr. Louis had practically become my full-time caregivers, and I felt it was unfair to them. In December 2017, during the Posadas, I had a serious conversation with my 3 children over a video call on WhatsApp. It was the first time in months that I saw all their faces at once. Kids, I told them, I can't keep living alone. The doctors say it's dangerous for me and my neighbors can no longer care for me constantly. I need your help to decide what we will do. An uncomfortable silence followed. Robert was the first to speak. Mom, we've been talking, and we believe the best thing would be for you to move to a place where you can get professional care. What place? I asked, although I already had an idea of what he meant. A nursing home, Mom, said Alexander. But a really good one with doctors and nurses where you can be with people your age. Gabrielle quickly added, we don't have the medical knowledge to care for you the way you need. You'll be much better in a specialized nursing home. I fell completely silent. My children, whom I had raised with so much love, were suggesting that I enter a nursing home to get rid of me. I don't want to go to a nursing home, I exclaimed, my voice trembling. I want to be with my family. Robert responded with a lack of understanding. It's sensible, Mom. We will visit you often, but you need care that we can't provide. I asked for some time to think it over, although in my heart I already knew they had made this decision without including me. In the following weeks, my children became very insistent about the nursing home. They sent me information via WhatsApp about various facilities, explaining the benefits of living in a retirement community. They were trying to convince me it was what was best for everyone. I resisted, cried, and pleaded for them to reconsider their decision. Please, I begged. I don't want to be surrounded by strangers. I want to be with you, with my family. But their minds were already made up. Robert explained that he and Veronica had decided to remodel their home and that there would be no space for me, at least for the next year. Alexander mentioned that he had received a promotion at work that required a lot of travel, so he wouldn't be able to take care of me. Gabrielle informed me that Frank had accepted a job in Houston, Texas, and that they would be moving there for 2 years. They were all lies, my dear ones. Over time, I realized they were just excuses to justify what they had already decided about me. The day that changed my life forever was February 15, 2018. It was a Thursday morning, and I had just turned 64 the week before. My birthday had been incredibly sad, only Ms. Carmen had brought me a small cake she made herself, and my children had only wished me well through WhatsApp messages. That morning, I woke up feeling especially unwell. I had had a rough night dealing with leg pain and breathing problems. I was having breakfast, some tortillas with beans, when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there was Robert, dressed formally in a gray suit and a blue tie. His expression was serious, like when he attended important work meetings. Good morning, Mom, he said, but this time he didn't give me a hug or a kiss like he usually did. Can we talk? Of course, son. Go ahead, I replied, although a sense of unease began to grow in me because of his demeanor. Have you had breakfast? Would you like me to make you some eggs? No, Mom, thanks. I've already eaten. He sat down in the living room in the armchair that his father used to sit in to watch the news. I need to talk to you about something important. I took a seat across from him in the small chair I had bought at a thrift store when we married. What's wrong, son? Is there a problem? Robert took a deep breath and looked me in the eyes. Mom, we've made a decision regarding your situation. Alexander and Gabrielle agree with me. I felt a knot in my stomach. What decision? We have found a very good nursing home for you. It's called Residencia Guadalupana. It's here in Guadalajara, in the Tlaquepaque area. It's a beautiful place with gardens and specialized medical staff. Robert, I've told you that I don't want to go to a nursing home, I replied, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Mom, it's not negotiable, he said in a cold tone I had never heard before. Your health is very deteriorated, and we cannot take care of you. It's our only option. But son, I can keep living here. Ms. Carmen helps me, and I promise I'll take better care of myself. No, Mom. Yesterday we had a video call with the three of us, and the decision has been made. We're taking you to the nursing home on Monday. Monday. That's in 4 days. You're not giving me any time to prepare. Robert stood up from the armchair and walked towards the door. Mom, the less time you have to think about this, the better it will be for everyone. Alexander is coming from Monterey to help with the move, and Gabrielle will be here on Sunday to help pack. Robert, please, I said, taking him by the arm. Don't do this to me. I raised you. I gave you everything I had. I worked my whole life to give you the best. Don't abandon me like this. My son gently but firmly pulled my hand away from his arm. Mom, we're not abandoning you. We're taking you to a place where they'll be able to take better care of you than we can. You'll like it there? What if I don't like it? What if I want to come back? Robert fell silent for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Mom, the nursing home is already paid for a whole year. There's no turning back. With those words, my son left the house. He left me in the living room crying like an abandoned child. In that moment, I realized that to him and his siblings, I was no longer their mother. I was just a problem they needed to solve quickly. Those 4 days became the longest and most painful of my life. I could neither eat nor sleep, only cry and cry as I thought about how I had come to this point, when my children had stopped loving me, how they could, after everything I had done for them, get rid of me as if I were an old dog. Miss Carmen found out what was happening because she heard my sobs from her house. She came to comfort me and stayed by my side for hours, hugging me and assuring me that everything would be okay. Maybe it won't be as bad as you think, María Elena. Perhaps you'll meet new people there, make friends. But I knew the truth. My children were getting rid of me because I had become a burden they didn't want to carry. On Sunday, Gabrielle arrived with 2 big suitcases and several boxes. She was no longer the sweet little girl I had raised. She had turned into a cold, efficient woman, addressing me as if I were an employee she needed to give instructions to. Mom, you can only take the essentials, she said as she rummaged through my closet. In the nursing home, there's not much space for personal belongings, but what will happen to my furniture? What about my photographs and your dad's things? Robert will take care of selling the house and the furniture. The money will go toward covering the nursing home costs. Will they sell the house? I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I lived here with your dad. I raised you here. This place is filled with memories. Gabrielle didn't even look at me. She kept packing my clothes without showing any emotion. Mom, be realistic. You won't be living here anymore. It doesn't make sense to keep an empty house. That night, my last time in the home where I had been happy, where I raised my children, where I shared so many years with Raúl, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake all night, wandering through every corner, touching every piece of furniture, remembering every significant moment I lived within those walls. In the bedroom where I slept with Raúl, I recalled the nights we stayed awake, planning our children's future, dreaming of watching them grow and succeed. In the kitchen, I remembered the thousands of meals I lovingly prepared, the breakfasts before they left for school, the dinners where we shared how their day had been. In the living room, I relived Christmases opening gifts, birthdays, afternoons watching television together. I never imagined my last moments in that house would be so sad and lonely. Monday, February 19th, 2018 arrived like a sentence. At 9 a.m., Robert and Alexander pulled up in a white pickup truck that Robert had borrowed from work. Alexander had arrived Sunday night from Monterey, but he hadn't come by to see me. He had stayed at Robert's to better organize the move. When I saw them arrive, I felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. There were my 2 children, those little ones I once held when they were babies, whom I sang to help them sleep, for whom I worked tirelessly for so many years. Now they were coming to take me out of my home as if I were a delinquent tenant. "Good morning, Mom," Alexander said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. It was clear he felt uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to be there. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Ready for what?" I replied, even though I already knew the answer. "To take you to the nursing home, Mom," Robert added. "They're expecting you at 10:30. Gabrielle arrived a few minutes later with Frank, who hadn't been to my house in years and clearly didn't want to be there. He stood in the doorway, watching with disdain, as if my humble home were contagious. "Is that all?" Robert asked, pointing to the 2 suitcases and 3 boxes we had packed. "This represents my whole life," I replied, my voice reflecting the deep pain I carried inside. Robert and Alexander began loading my few belongings into the truck. Gabrielle checked the house, apparently to make sure we weren't leaving anything essential, although I knew she was actually estimating the value of the furniture they planned to sell. Once they finished loading everything, Robert said to me, "Let's go, Mom, we don't want to be late." I walked to the door of my home and touched it for the last time. "Goodbye, little house," I murmured softly. "Thank you for all the years of happiness you provided me." Miss Carmen came out to say goodbye, crying as much as I was. "Take care, María Elena," she said, hugging me tightly. "And don't hesitate to call me if you need anything." "Thank you for everything, Carmen," I replied. "You were a better family for me than my own children." Robert heard this and made a face of annoyance. "Get in the car, Mom. We're running late." The ride to the nursing home was the quietest and most painful of my life. I sat in the back seat of Robert's truck, surrounded by my suitcases, watching the streets of Guadalajara pass by for the last time as a free person. Gabrielle was in the passenger seat, sending messages from her phone. Alexander was in his own vehicle, following us. No one spoke to me. It was as if I no longer existed to them. The Guadalupana residence was located on a side street in Tlaquepaque, in an area I didn't know well. It was a large two-story building painted a soft yellow with white bars. At the entrance there was a sign announcing it as a residence for the elderly. Specialized care 24 hours a day. Upon arrival, we were greeted by the director, a woman around 50 years old named Licenciada Patricia Mendoza. Her kindness was cordial, though she impressed more with her professionalism than with her sincerity. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. María Elena," she said, as she extended her hand to me. "We've spoken to your children over the phone, and everything is ready for your arrival." She showed me the facilities, the communal dining area, the television room, the gardens, and the infirmary. Everything looked clean and tidy, but the atmosphere felt cold and melancholic. I saw other elderly people sitting in wheelchairs or slowly walking down the hallways, all with a lost expression on their faces. "Your room is on the second floor," Ms. Mendez explained as we went up in a small elevator. "You will share it with Mrs. Hope, who is good company." The room was quite small, with 2 beds, 2 nightstands, a narrow closet, and a shared bathroom. On one of the beds lay a thin woman in her 80s, who greeted me with a shy smile. "This is Mrs. Hope Vasquez," the licensed nurse introduced her. "Hope, this is María Elena, your new roommate." Hope looked very fragile, but her eyes, filled with sadness and sweetness, were striking. "Nice to meet you, María Elena," she said in a soft voice. "I hope we can have a good relationship." Robert and Alexander carried my bags and boxes to the room. My entire world was now reduced to half of a room that I had to share with a stranger. Ms. Mendez explained to my children the visiting hours, the rules of the nursing home, and provided them with a folder containing information about medical services and activities available for the residents. "Do you have any concerns, Mrs. María Elena?" the nurse asked me. I had 1,000 questions, but the only one I managed to ask was, "How often can my children visit me?" "Visiting hours are every day from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., she replied. "Although we suggest that they come frequently in the first few days to help you adapt." Robert checked his watch. "Well, Mom, it's time for us to go. I'll come back tomorrow to see how you're doing." Alexander gave me a brief hug. "Take care, Mom. You'll see that you'll be just fine here." Gabrielle kissed me on the forehead. "I'll come on Wednesday, Mommy. Frank will be with me." So my 3 children said goodbye, leaving me there as if I were a package at a shipping service. I stood at the door of my new room, watching them walk down the hallway without looking back even once. Hope came over and placed her hand on my shoulder. "Don't cry, María Elena," she said to me. "At first it's challenging, but little by little you'll get used to it." "How long have you been here?" I asked her. 3 years, she replied. "My children also brought me here because they could no longer take care of me." That night, my first night in the nursing home, I cried until I ran out of tears. Hope stayed quietly by my side, not trying to console me with empty words. She just sat on her bed and allowed me to release all the pain I was holding inside. Thus began my new chapter at 64 years old as a resident of this nursing home, abandoned by my own children, without a home, without family, and just with a shared room and a broken heart. The first days in the nursing home felt like a bad dream. I struggled to adjust to the schedules, the food, the constant murmuring of the residents, sleeping in a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled of disinfectant and medication. The routine was quite rigid. I woke up at 6 in the morning, had breakfast at 7, took my medications at 8, participated in recreational activities at 9, had lunch at 1, a mandatory nap from 2 to 4, a snack at 5, dinner at 7, another round of medications at 8, and lights out at 9 in the evening. It felt like being confined, but in a place designated for those who, simply because they aged, became a burden to their families. Most of the other residents were much older than I was, many dealing with dementia or serious health issues. Some cried at night, others didn't recognize even their own family members during visits, and a few had simply given up on fighting, spending the whole day sitting in their wheelchairs staring at the wall. Hope, my roommate, turned out to be a true blessing. She was from Lagos de Moreno and had worked as a primary school teacher for 40 years. She had 3 children who lived in different cities across the United States and only visited her once a year at Christmas. At first, I was quite upset too. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, she explained to me that she couldn't understand how her children, whom she had raised with so much love, could leave her like this. But then I understood that each generation is different and that they have their own lives to build, even though we also dedicated our lives to raising them, I told her. Yes, but that was our mistake, Hope replied to me. We thought that because of our sacrifices for them, they should do the same for us. However, life doesn't work that way. In the first few weeks, my kids did come to see me, but it was always brief and hurried. Robert would arrive on Tuesdays after work. He'd stay for about an hour, ask how I was doing, bring me some fruit or snacks, and then leave, saying he had to get home early because Veronica was waiting for him. Alexander came 3 times during the first month, each time on the weekend since he was very busy with his job during the week. He would stay for a while, talk to me about his kids, show me pictures on his phone, and then say he had to head back to Monterey because he had important meetings on Monday morning. Gabrielle was the one who visited me most often at first, but she always brought Frank along, who clearly didn't want to be there. They would stay in the visitors' lounge, never coming up to my room, and Frank was always checking his watch or answering work calls. By the 3rd month, visits had decreased significantly. Robert was starting to come every 2 weeks. Alexander had stopped coming altogether. He would only call me once a week, and Gabrielle was coming once a month, this time without Frank. By the 6th month, Robert was only coming once a month. Alexander was calling me every 2 weeks, and Gabrielle had started messaging me on WhatsApp instead of visiting. It was clear that the dilemma of what to do with Mom had already been resolved for them. I was in a safe place where I was being cared for professionally, and they could continue their lives without worrying about me. But something interesting began to happen around the 4th month at the nursing home. I started to get to know the other residents better and discovered that many of them had fascinating stories. There was a woman named Shelley who had worked as a seamstress throughout her life and had made dresses for numerous famous artists in the 1960s and 1970s. Her hands were extraordinary, and even though she suffered from arthritis, she could still create beautiful pieces. Then there was Mr. Arnold, a musician who had been part of a famous mariachi band and still played the guitar with impressive beauty. Every afternoon, when I arrived at the garden, the nursing home was filled with music and joy. I also met Ms. Lucy, who had owned a highly successful bakery for 30 years and still knew how to make the best sweet bread I had ever tasted in my life. And there were many more. A man who had been an airplane mechanic, a woman who worked as the governor's secretary, another man who had a renowned butcher shop, and a lady who had served as a nurse during the epidemics of the 1980s. They all shared something in common with me. They had been active, valuable, and influential members of their communities, and now their families had sent them to the nursing home because they had become a burden. But I began to notice something really significant. Even though our families had left us behind, we were not dead. We still possessed knowledge, experience, and a desire to live. We were like a human library full of wisdom that no one was taking advantage of. It was at that moment that an idea emerged in me that would completely change my life. The idea came to me one afternoon in June 2018, after I had been in the nursing home for 4 months. I was sitting in the garden with Miss Shelley and Mr. Arnold, listening to him perform a beautiful song by George Allen. Suddenly, Mr. Arnold stopped and said to us, "Do you know what hurts me the most about being here? It's not the fact that my children have abandoned me. The most painful thing is that all the music I have inside, every piece of music I know, and all the stories of the places I've played will die with me. My grandchildren don't even know their grandfather was a musician." Miss Shelley sighed deeply. I feel the same way. I have beautiful outfits. I have unique patterns that I developed over 40 years of work, and all of that is about to disappear because no one is interested in learning anymore. Hope added, I have taught over 1,000 children to read throughout my teaching career. I enjoy teaching methods that are genuinely effective, but now here I am just sitting and watching television all day. At that moment, something lit up in my mind. What if it doesn't have to be this way? I said. What if instead of waiting here for death, we used everything we know to create something useful? Like what? Mr. Arnold asked me. I don't have the answer yet, I replied. But there must be something we can do, something that can bring back our sense of usefulness, something that makes us feel alive again. That night, I couldn't sleep thinking about what we had discussed. The next day, I began talking to other residents about their past lives, about the things they knew how to do, and about the talents they had. I discovered wonders. Mr. John had been an electrician for 45 years and still knew how to fix any electrical device. Miss Carmen had worked as a cook in a very famous restaurant and knew delicious recipes that nobody made anymore. Mr. Michael had been a gardener and could grow any type of plant. Miss Hope, the other Hope, not my roommate, had been an accountant and had a very sharp mind for numbers. We were a total of 47 residents in the nursing home, and each one had some knowledge or skill that could be valuable in the outside world. But the challenge was how to harness all that potential. We were confined in the nursing home. Our families had forgotten us, and society considered us as human waste that no longer had value. It was Ms. Lucy, who had run a bakery, who gave me the first clue on how we could start. María Elena mentioned to me one afternoon while we were working in the craft workshop, "You know, there's an elementary school nearby that is always looking for help with their programs." "Really?" I asked. "Yes, my niece works there as a secretary. She told me they always need people to assist with extracurricular activities for the children, but they lack the budget to hire specialized teachers." That was when I began to formulate an idea in my mind. That same week, I asked Mrs. Mendez for permission to call the Benito Juarez Elementary School, which is about 6 blocks from the nursing home. I spoke with the principal, Ms. Rose Hernandez, and shared my proposal. "Ma'am," I said, "in the nursing home, we have many residents with vast experience in different trades and professions. Wouldn't it be beneficial for us to share our job stories with the children at no cost, just for the satisfaction of teaching?" Ms. Rose showed great interest. "That's right, we are always looking for engaging activities for the children." "What kind of jobs do you know?" I told her about Mr. Arnold and his music, about Mrs. Shelley and sewing, about Mr. John and electricity, and about Ms. Lucy and baking. The teacher was very enthusiastic. Do you know what she suggested? "Why don't they come next Friday? We could organize an activity where each of them explains their job to the children. The kids will be fascinated." When I shared the invitation with my fellow residents, the excitement was overwhelming. Mr. Arnold immediately offered to bring his guitar to give the kids a little performance. Mrs. Shelley said she could bring some fabrics and teach them some basic sewing stitches. Mr. John wanted to bring small tools to show them how electricity works, but there was a catch. How were we going to leave the nursing home? The residents couldn't go out alone. We needed someone to accompany us. I spoke to Ms. Mendez to request her authorization. At first, she was quite reluctant. Ms. María Elena, I recognize your noble intentions, but our responsibility is to ensure your safety. We cannot allow the residents to go out like this. But I insisted, we don't want to go to the cantina or the casino. We want to visit an elementary school to help the children. What could be dangerous about that? After much insistence and a confirmation call from the school principal, Ms. Mendez finally consented, but under certain conditions. Only 5 residents could participate. We had to be accompanied by a nurse from the nursing home, and we would have a maximum of 2 hours outside. Friday, July 13th, 2018 was one of the most exciting days I have experienced since I arrived at the nursing home. We left at 9 in the morning. Mr. Arnold brought his guitar, Mrs. Shelley a suitcase full of fabrics and large needles, Mr. John a box of small tools, Miss Lucy some sweet bread she had baked in the nursing home's kitchen, and I was eager to be useful again. The Benito Juarez Elementary School was a simple 2-story building painted blue and white. They were waiting for us in the main courtyard, organized by grade from 1st to 6th. When they saw us arrive, they began to applaud and cheer with joy. "The grandparents have arrived," exclaimed a 2nd grade boy. "They're going to teach us things," added a 4th grade girl. Ms. Rose introduced us to all the kids, and then each of us had the chance to interact with different groups. Mr. Arnold was the most successful. He sat in a chair in the middle of the yard, took out his guitar, and started playing the Mañanitas. Immediately, all the children gathered around him, singing and clapping. He then performed La Llorona, El Rey, and México Lindo y Querido. The kids were amazed to see his fingers moving over the strings, and several asked him if he could teach them. Mrs. Shelley set up her sewing workshop in a classroom. She taught the older kids how to thread needles, do simple stitches, and sew buttons. Although the girls showed special interest, some boys also eagerly participated. Mr. John conducted a demonstration of basic electricity using bulbs, wires, and batteries. The kids were astonished to see how he lit a bulb by connecting it to a battery with the wires. "It's magic!" exclaimed a 1st grader. Miss Lucy taught some little ones how to make bread and handed out the sweet rolls she had brought. The kids, who had never been exposed to the bread-making process before, were captivated by how it was done. I spoke with a group of 5th and 6th graders about the importance of effort and dedication. I shared stories from my life about how I struggled to provide for my children and the satisfaction I felt in building a family with love and dedication. But the most beautiful part was seeing the smiles on the children's faces. They showed a genuine interest in what we were teaching. They asked us smart questions, requested more stories, wanted to play the instruments, and experiment with the tools. At the end of our visit, the children surrounded us to say goodbye. Many hugged us, while others gave us drawings they had made. Some asked when we would come back. "You were the best teachers we've ever had," shouted a 3rd grade girl. "We want you to come every week," exclaimed a 2nd grade boy. On the way back to the shelter, the 5 of us traveled in complete silence, but it was a silence filled with happiness. After months of feeling useless, like a burden to society, we had just discovered that we still had so much to offer. "I haven't felt this joy in years," Mr. Arnold told me. "The children reminded me why I loved teaching so much," Mrs. Shelley added. That night, as I lay in bed at the nursing home, I began to envision a much more ambitious project than just an occasional visit to the school. I started to fantasize about how we could turn this experience into something lasting, something that would bring meaning and direction to our lives. Unbeknownst to me, that day marked the beginning of my transformation from a helpless old woman in a nursing home to a woman in search of a mission. After the success of our first visit to the school, the atmosphere in the nursing home changed dramatically. The 5 of us who attended couldn't stop sharing what we had experienced, and that sparked the interest of other residents in getting involved as well. "Could I go next time?" asked Miss Carmen, who had worked as a cook. "I could teach the children how to make tortillas by hand." And Mr. Michael added, "I could teach them about gardening. Could we plant seeds at the school?" The atmosphere in the nursing home was completely revitalized. Instead of sitting around watching television or lamenting our ailments, everyone was now focused on what they could teach. What knowledge could they share? However, I knew that to ensure the long-term viability of this initiative, we needed to get ourselves organized better. We couldn't rely solely on Ms. Mendez's willingness to take us out of the nursing home once a month. It was Hope, my roommate, who provided me with the fundamental idea. "Why don't we formalize this?" suggested Maria Elena one night. "If it becomes an official program of the nursing home, the administration will have to support us." She was right. We needed to approach this matter professionally. In the following weeks, we began to work on a formal proposal. With the collaboration of Mrs. Hope, the accountant, we developed a meticulous plan that we called the Intergenerational Exchange Program, Wisdom in Action. The idea was simple but had great potential. The residents of the nursing home would volunteer to conduct free workshops in schools, community centers, and other institutions, passing on their knowledge and experiences to younger generations. We created an inventory of all the talents we had in the nursing home. Mr. Arnold with his skill in music and singing, Doña Shelley, an expert in sewing and knitting, Mr. John, who taught basic electricity, Miss Lucy, a baking and pastry teacher, Ms. Carmen, with her experience in traditional Mexican cooking, Mr. Michael, who shared his knowledge of gardening and plant cultivation. Doña Hope, who was an accountant, handled basic math and money management, and Hope, my partner, taught teaching techniques and reading. Don Raul taught basic carpentry, and Doña Grace, who had been a nurse, focused on first aid. Together, we compiled a list of 23 residents with particular skills. We also created an activity calendar, evaluation methods, and even designed simple certificates we could award to the children participating in our workshops. The proposal consisted of 15 handwritten pages, since none of us knew how to use a computer, illustrated with drawings by Doña Shelley to represent the different activities. The challenge was how to present this proposal. Ms. Mendez was kind, but also quite conservative and resistant to changes or complications. I chose to employ a strategy I had learned throughout my years of work. Start slowly, demonstrate that it works, and then seek official support. First, I persuaded Ms. Mendez to allow us to make a second visit to the elementary school, this time with 10 residents instead of 5. I explained that the principal was delighted with our first visit and had formally invited us to return. The second visit was even more successful than the first. On this occasion, we brought specific materials for each workshop. Mr. Michael brought seeds and small pots to teach the children how to plant. Miss Carmen brought dough and ingredients to prepare tortillas with the kids. Doña Grace shared basic first aid techniques using practice dolls. The little ones were fascinated. The principal, Ms. Rose, was so impressed that she requested a private meeting with me. Ms. Maria Elena told me, "What you are doing is admirable. The children haven't stopped talking about your workshops. Several parents have asked me when you will return." "We are very glad to hear that, teacher," I replied. "It brings us great satisfaction as well." Do you know what they suggested to me? I would like to propose something to you. What do you think about setting this up every week? We could have a fixed day, say Fridays, when you come to offer your workshops. My heart started to race. Seriously, teacher, every week, right? But with one condition, we would need to formalize this through the education system. This would have to be included as part of the school program. What would we need to do to make that happen? We would have to draft a formal proposal for the school board, and you would need to be officially registered as educational volunteers. That night, I returned to the care home with a clear goal. We needed to formalize our program, not just for the school, but also for the care home. For the next 2 weeks, I worked harder than I had in many years. With the support of Hope and Ms. Hope, We refined our proposal, polished it, and prepared a presentation for Ms. Mendez. But before presenting the proposal to her, I decided to do something I had never done in my life. I called my children to ask for their help with something that was truly important to me. First, I contacted Gabrielle. "Honey," I said, "I need your help with something very meaningful." "What's going on, Mom?" "Okay, is it something medical?" The concern was evident in her voice, just in case there was an emergency. "No, it's not something medical. It's about a project we're doing here at the care home." I explained the whole program, the school visits, and the proposal we had created. Gabrielle listened in silence. "Mom," she said after I finished explaining, "that sounds really nice, but don't you think you're complicating things? They're here to rest, not to work." "But Gabrielle, this isn't work. It makes me feel useful. It renews my life." "Oh, Mom, but what if you get hurt or fall ill with so much going on? We put you here so you could be calm and well cared for." The conversation didn't go as I had anticipated. Gabrielle didn't understand why this was so vital for me. Then I called Robert. His reaction was even more negative. "Mom, why do you need to get involved in those problems? You've already paid your dues to society. You've worked your whole life. Now it's time to rest." But Robert, I feel good. I feel relevant doing this." "Mom, please don't complicate your life. They take wonderful care of you at the care home. You have food, medicine, and your room. What more do you need?" Alexander was a bit more understanding, although he still didn't grasp the relevance of what we were doing. "Okay, Mom, if that makes you happy, but don't overdo it, all right?" None of my 3 children understood that I not only wanted to be taken care of and at peace, I longed to continue being a productive person, useful with a purpose. However, their lack of support, instead of discouraging me, intensified my determination. If they weren't going to back my new mission in life, I would pursue it on my own. On August 15, 2018, I requested a formal appointment with Ms. Mendez to present our proposal. I arrived at her office with a folder containing our 15-page plan, letters of recommendation from the elementary school principal, and even written testimonials from some children who had participated in our workshops. "Ma'am," I said, "I would like to present to you a proposal that has the potential to transform the lives of all the residents of this nursing home." Ms. Mendez listened carefully as I detailed the program. I showed her the documentation, shared the children's testimonials, and explained the benefits this could bring both to the residents and to the community. At the end of my presentation, Ms. Mendez was silent for a few minutes, which felt like an eternity. "Mrs. María Elena," she finally responded, "your proposal is quite interesting. However, there are numerous legal and administrative aspects we would need to evaluate. The responsibility of having residents outside the nursing home, insurance, permits, these are important issues." "Ma'am," I interrupted her, "we are not asking you to solve all the issues immediately. We are simply seeking your support to carry this out officially. And if something goes wrong, what happens if a resident gets hurt? What if a problem arises with the children? Ma'am, we have already done this twice and everything has turned out perfectly. Besides, look at how the residents who participated have changed. Mr. Arnold no longer spends his days consumed by sadness. Mrs. Shelley has more energy than ever. We are all happier and healthier. It was a reality. Those residents who had enjoyed visits to the school showed a remarkable change in their mood, energy, and even their physical health. Ms. Mendez asked me for a couple of weeks to study the proposal and consult it with the central management of the network of nursing homes to which the Guadalupe residents belonged. Those 2 weeks felt endless. Every day, several residents asked me if there were any updates on the proposal. The excitement in the nursing home was palpable. Finally, on August 30th, Ms. Mendez called me to her office. "Ms. María Elena," she said, "I spoke with my supervisors and also consulted with our lawyers. I felt a knot in my stomach. From her tone, it seemed that the news would not be favorable. But then She delivered the answer I had been hoping for. It was positive. We are going to implement your program as a pilot project. I couldn't contain my emotion. I started to cry tears of joy in that moment in her office, but it continued. It had to be done under very specific conditions. She explained the requirements to me. Only residents with explicit medical authorization could participate. There always had to be supervision from nursing home staff. Activities had to be limited to official educational institutions, and we would have to submit monthly reports on all activities. I didn't care about the conditions. What mattered was that we had obtained official backing. That afternoon, I called all the residents interested to the garden of the nursing home to share the news with them. When I announced that our program had received official approval, the joy was indescribable. Mr. Arnold began to play Las Mañanitas on his guitar. Miss Shelley exclaimed, "Hooray!" And everyone started clapping and hugging each other. For the first time since I arrived at the nursing home, I felt truly alive. I had a purpose, a mission, something meaningful to do with the rest of my life. And the most extraordinary thing was that I had achieved this through my own determination, without relying on my children or anyone else's approval but my own. The intergenerational exchange program, Wisdom in Action, officially started on Friday, September 7th, 2018. That day, 12 residents from the nursing home headed to Benito Juarez Primary School for our first official session as educational volunteers. The transformation was immediate and spectacular. Fridays became the most anticipated day of the week for all of us. Each resident had a specialty and a group of children assigned to them. The organization was impeccable. Mr. Arnold held his music workshop with kids from all grades. Doña Shelley led the sewing circle with the older girls. Mr. John taught basic science through electricity experiments. However, what was most striking was seeing how the children waited for us every Friday. Upon arriving at school, they greeted us with joyful shouts. "Our special teachers are here!" They had begun to call us the wise grandparents, a title that filled us with pride. By October, we had a waiting list of children eager to join our workshops. The director, Ms. Rose, asked us to consider coming twice a week due to the high demand. But something even more wonderful was happening. Other nursing homes and institutions had started to learn about our program and wanted to implement it. Ms. Mendez was receiving nearly daily calls from directors of other homes asking how they could establish similar programs. In November 2018, we received an invitation that changed everything. The Department of Education of Jalisco wanted us to present our program at a state congress on community education. Mrs. María Elena told me, "Ms. Mendez, this is a big deal. Government officials, school directors from across the state, and the media would be present." Initially, I was filled with fear. I was a 64-year-old woman with a primary education who had spent my life working as a cleaner. What could I possibly contribute at a congress with such significant people? But hope encouraged me, saying it was essential to do it. María Elena told me, "This is no longer just about us. If our program succeeds here, it could be replicated across the state, maybe even throughout the country." Imagine all those seniors feeling abandoned in nursing homes, feeling useless. We can show them that there's a different way to live this stage of life. She was right. This had become something much greater than my personal issues. On November 15, 2018, 5 residents from the nursing home traveled to Guadalajara to present our program at the State Congress on Community Education. It was the first time in months that I left the Tlaquepaque area, and I was amazed to see how much the city had changed. The conference took place in a very luxurious hotel in the Providencia area. When I arrived, I felt a bit overwhelmed by all the attendees. Government officials dressed in elegant suits, university deans and researchers with impressive credentials. But when it was our turn to present, something magical happened. Instead of feeling intimidated, I felt empowered. I had something valuable to share, something none of those academics possessed, real experience in transforming lives. Good morning. I began my speech. My name is María Elena Rodriguez. I am 64 years old, and until 8 months ago, I was just another one of the thousands of elderly people abandoned in nursing homes, waiting for death without purpose or hope. The auditorium fell completely silent. Today, I am here to tell you how a group of elderly people deemed useless developed a program that not only gave us back our dignity and sense of life, but is also positively impacting the education of hundreds of children. For the next 20 minutes, I shared our story, how it all began, the challenges we faced, and the achievements we accomplished. Mr. Arnold played a brief melody on his guitar. Doña Shelley showcased some sewing works the children had done, and Mr. John conducted a small demonstration on electricity. At the end of our presentation, the audience stood up and gave us a warm applause that lasted several minutes. Subsequently, several people approached to inquire about the program and request information on how they could replicate it in their communities. But the biggest surprise came at the end of the conference. The Secretary of Education of Jalisco, Mr. Carlos Lomelli, approached us personally to congratulate us. Mrs. María Elena said to me, "What you have created is exactly the kind of educational innovation we need in our state. Would you be interested in turning this into an official state government program?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An official program? Yes, we want to implement the Wisdom in Action program in 50 elementary schools in the state as a pilot project. You would be the general coordinators and would receive financial support to carry out the program. That night at the hotel where we were staying, after months of sleeping in an asylum room, excitement kept me from falling asleep. In less than 8 months, I had gone from being a homeless elderly woman to coordinating a state educational program. However, the most important thing was not the recognition or the financial opportunity. What truly mattered was that we had demonstrated that older adults are not discarded members of society. We are human libraries filled with wisdom, experience, and knowledge that the new generations need. When we returned to the asylum the next day, we were welcomed as heroes. Ms. Mendez had decorated the entrance with a sign that read, "Welcome, Ambassadors of Wisdom." All the residents were waiting for us in the garden, clapping and cheering joyfully. That night, I called my 3 children to share what had happened. For the first time in months, all 3 showed genuine interest in what I was doing. "Really, Mom?" Robert said to me. "The state government wants you to coordinate an official program." "Yes, son. They are going to implement our program in 50 schools." "Oh, Mom, what pride," Gabrielle commented. "And you will receive a salary. That's why they will provide financial support, but that's not what really matters. What's fundamental is that we are helping many older adults feel valuable again." Alexander was the most amazed. "Mom, this is incredible. Who would have thought you would become a government official at 64? The first time I was taken to the asylum, I could hear pride in my children's voices. I was no longer just the mom in the asylum, but the mom who is revolutionizing the educational field in Jalisco. Although, deep down, I knew this success was due to my own determination, my firm decision not to give up, my refusal to accept that my life was over just because my children had left me behind. In December 2018, we signed the formal agreement with the Department of Education of Jalisco. The program Wisdom in Action was officially established as a public policy of the state, and I was appointed as its general coordinator. With financial support from the government, we were able to formalize our activities, train more elderly people from other care homes, and create professional educational materials for our workshops. By March 2019, we had the program up and running in 25 schools across 10 different municipalities in Jalisco. Over 200 seniors were involved as educational volunteers, and more than 3,000 children were benefiting from our workshops. My life had completely transformed. I was no longer a resident of the care home, spending my days in front of the television, waiting for visits that never came. Now I had a full schedule, important meetings, and real responsibilities. But the most beautiful part was the impact we were having on other seniors. Every week we received letters at the care home from men and women all over the state, sharing how the program had transformed their lives, how they had regained their sense of purpose, and how they felt valued again. One letter I'll never forget was from Doña Hope Martinez from Zapopan, who was 71 and had been battling depression in a care home for 2 years. Mrs. María Elena, thanks to your program, I feel alive again. I was an accountant for 40 years and thought that all my knowledge was worthless. But now I'm teaching basic math to elementary school children, and they see me as a meaningful teacher. I no longer feel like a burden. I feel useful, needed, and valued. Those letters touched my heart and confirmed that we had truly accomplished something significant. By mid-2019, the Wisdom in Action program had exceeded our most optimistic expectations. We were no longer just operating in Jalisco. Other states began to implement versions of the program, and we received invitations to present it at both national and international conferences. However, the most significant change in my personal life came in August 2019 when I turned 65. For the first time since I arrived at the care home, all 3 of my children came together to visit me for my birthday. And not only that, they came with their families. Robert came with Veronica and their 2 kids, who were already 16 and 14 years old. Alexander traveled from Monterrey with Patricia and their 3 children aged 18, 15, and 12. And Gabrielle came with Frank and their 2 young daughters, aged 8 and 6. It was the first time in over 5 years that my whole family was gathered in one place. The difference was that this time, the venue was the nursing home's garden, not the family home they had sold without consulting me. But something had fundamentally shifted in the family dynamic. I was no longer the abandoned mother in the nursing home who inspired guilt and pity. Now I was the grandmother making headlines, the coordinator of a government program, the woman who was revolutionizing education. My grandchildren, who had hardly known me before, now looked at me with admiration and curiosity. The oldest, Robert's son, asked me, "Grandma, is it true that you're working with the governor?" "Not exactly with the governor," I clarified, dear. "However, we are in touch with the state government to assist other elderly folks like me." My 15-year-old granddaughter, Alexander's daughter, remarked, "Grandma, my civics teacher showed a video about your program in class. I told everyone you were my grandma, and they were really impressed. It was ironic. My own grandchildren knew me better through the media than from family visits." During the celebration held in the main hall of the nursing home, featuring a cake that Ms. Lucy had specially prepared for the occasion, I noticed my children were behaving quite differently. They no longer spoke to me with the condescending tone that adults often adopt with the elderly. They addressed me with respect, admiration, and even a hint of pride. "Mom," Robert said during the toast, "we want to apologize." An awkward silence followed. It was something I hadn't expected to hear. "When we brought you here," he continued, "we thought it was what was best for you, but we realized we may not have understood what you really needed." Gabriel added, "We thought you wanted peace and no worries. We didn't know that what you longed for was to still feel useful." Alexander was more straightforward. "Mom, we are very proud of your accomplishments. We never imagined you had all this leadership potential." Their words left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad to know they were proud of me, but on the other, it hurt that it took this moment for them to see me as capable and valuable. "Children," I said, "I've always had this ability. The problem is that you never gave me the chance to prove it. For all the years I worked to support you, you saw me only as the mom who takes care of things, not as a person with her own talents and aspirations." The conversation became a bit tense, but it was necessary. For the first time in a long while, we spoke honestly about what had happened in our family. Robert asked me, "Mom, are you angry with us for bringing you here?" It was a complicated question to answer. On one hand, the abandonment was incredibly painful and forever changed how I perceived you. On the other hand, if you hadn't brought me to the asylum, I would never have had the opportunity to develop the program that transformed my life. "Robert," I thought before responding, "I'm upset about the way you did it. I'm upset because you made that decision without consulting me, because you treated me like an object that needed to be put away somewhere. However, I can't be angry about the outcome, as I found my true life's purpose here." Veronica, who had been very quiet throughout the conversation, finally gathered the courage to speak. "Ms. Maria Elena, I want to apologize personally. I had a significant influence on Robert's decision, and now I understand that I was wrong. It was the first time Veronica offered me an apology, and also the first time she called me Miss Maria Elena instead of just ma'am. The celebration of my birthday turned into a kind of family reconciliation, albeit on new terms. I was no longer the matriarch who depended on her children to survive. Now I was an independent, successful woman with my own life and achievements." By the end of the afternoon, as they were preparing to say goodbye, Gabrielle asked me a question that surprised me. "Mom, would you like to come live with one of us? Now that Frank and I have a bigger house, could we set up a room for you?" The question I had longed to hear during my first year in the asylum now stirred mixed emotions in me. "Gabrielle," I replied, "a year and a half ago, that question would have been the one thing I wanted to hear in the world. But now my life is here, my work is here, my friends are here, my purpose is here. But don't you miss having your own home? Don't you want to be with your family?" My daughter, I've learned that family isn't just made up of those who share your blood. My family now includes Hope, Mr. Arnold, Donya Shelley, and all the residents of the nursing home who have stood by me on this journey. And my home isn't a physical space. My home is where I can be valuable and make a difference. I think my children were surprised by that answer. They thought I would be very emotional about the idea of leaving the nursing home. However, the truth was that the nursing home was no longer a prison for me. It had become my operation center, the place from where I was transforming lives. That night, after my children left, I stayed in the nursing home's garden, reflecting on everything that had changed in my life. Exactly a year and a half ago, I had arrived at that place feeling like human waste. Now I felt like an empowered woman with purpose and a genuine impact on the world. Hope sat beside me on a bench in the garden. "How do you feel after your children's visit?" she asked. "I feel complete," I replied. "I no longer need their approval to feel valuable. I don't require being rescued. I can love them without depending on them." "That's wisdom," Hope told me. "It took us 65 years to learn it, but we finally did." She was right. At 65, I had finally learned to value myself, regardless of what others thought of me, even my own children. By the end of 2019, my life had changed in such a way that sometimes I find it hard to believe that it all happened in less than 2 years. The Wisdom in Action program was already being implemented in 8 states across Mexico, benefiting more than 100 elderly people and 15,000 children. We had received recognition from the federal government, international organizations, and even UNESCO, which showed interest in studying our model to replicate it in other countries in Latin America. But the most significant of all those recognitions was the change I observed every day in the elderly participants of the program. People who had come to the nursing homes with a sense of hopelessness, feeling useless, now found reasons to get up every morning, take care of their health, and feel proud of who they were. In January 2020, I received an invitation that exceeded all my expectations. The National Institute for Older Adults, INAPAM, had nominated me for the National Award for Elderly Merit, the most prestigious recognition given by the Mexican government to people my age. The award ceremony took place in the National Palace in Mexico City, in the presence of the President of the Republic. When I received the official notification, I couldn't believe it. I, María Elena Rodriguez, who had arrived at the nursing home feeling completely disposable, was now going to receive a national award from the President himself. On the day of the ceremony, August 28, 2020, I traveled to Mexico City, accompanied by Hope, Mr. Arnold, Ms. Shelley, and Ms. Mendez. It was my first time in the National Palace, and I was thrilled to think about all the history that had unfolded within those walls. When it was my turn to receive the award, the Master of Ceremonies announced, National Award for Elderly Merit in the category of Social Innovation. María Elena Rodriguez Hernandez, thanks to the Wisdom in Action program, has transformed the participation of older adults in community education. I walked toward the podium with my legs shaking from excitement. The president awarded me a beautiful medal and an official recognition. When he asked me to say a few words, the audience, filled with officials, ambassadors, and prominent figures, fell into deep silence. Mr. President, esteemed guests, I began, my voice trembling but firm. Exactly 2.5 years ago, I was a 64-year-old woman who had been abandoned in a nursing home by my own children, feeling useless, invisible, like a burden to society. I could see faces of astonishment in the audience. They didn't expect me to start my speech in such a raw and personal way. I'm not here to celebrate my personal triumph, but to highlight that in Mexico, there is a hidden treasure. Millions of older adults whose society has classified as unproductive, but who are actually living libraries of knowledge and experience. I continued speaking for 5 minutes about the importance of not wasting the potential of older adults and the urgency of transforming society's perception of us. As I finished my speech, the entire audience stood up and applauded for several minutes. After the ceremony, several media outlets approached me for interviews. A reporter from Televisa asked me, Mrs. María Elena, what message would you like to convey to the elderly in Mexico that it's never too late to start a new life? I replied, that family abandonment doesn't mean the end of our purpose. We can turn pain into empowerment, loneliness into service, and rejection into a new possibility to shine. That interview went viral on social media. In the following weeks, we received thousands of letters and messages from older individuals across the country who had seen the interview and wanted to participate in similar initiatives in their communities. My children, of course, watched the ceremony on television. That night, all three called to congratulate me. Mom, Robert told me, when we saw you there with the president, Veronica and I couldn't help but cry tears of pride. Yes, Mom, Gabrielle added. Frank commented, your mom is now more recognized than I am, and he was right. You've become a public figure of national relevance. Alexander was the most emotional. Mom, I'm sorry for doubting you. Forgive me for not understanding before what you were capable of. His words touched my heart, but I no longer needed their approval to feel proud of myself. It was comforting to hear their recognition, yet my self-esteem no longer depended on their perception. By the end of 2020, despite the difficulties caused by the pandemic, our program had grown impressively. We adapted our activities to be held virtually when necessary and created a digital platform where older adults from across the country could teach online classes to children in remote communities. Our impact wasn't limited to Mexico. The Organization of American States invited us to present our model at a Hemispheric Congress on Active Aging. Universities in Spain, Argentina, and Colombia were interested in studying our program to implement adapted version in their regions. However, for me, the most significant achievement wasn't the international recognition, but witnessing the daily transformation in the elderly. As part of our program, there were seniors like Mr. Alberto, who was 78 years old and had been battling depression in a nursing home in Zapopan for 3 years. Now he led woodworking workshops in 5 different schools. Then there was Mrs. Maria, 69, who had attempted to take her own life after being abandoned by her children. Today, she had become the most recognized traditional cooking teacher within the entire program. Each of these transformational stories reinforced my belief that we had created something truly innovative, a model where aging didn't signify the end of productivity, but the beginning of a new phase of service and meaning. In 2021, when I turned 67, my children organized a surprise party in an elegant venue in Guadalajara. They invited over 100 people, including government officials, school directors, nursing home companions, and even some of the children who had participated in our first workshops. It was completely different from my 65th birthday, which I celebrated in the nursing home garden. Now I was the guest of honor at a public commemoration, recognized as a prominent figure in the educational community of Jalisco. During the celebration, Robert took the microphone to give a speech. 3 years ago, my brother and I decided to take our mother to a nursing home because we believed she couldn't care for herself, that she had nothing left to contribute to society, he said. An uncomfortable silence fell over the attendees. Today, he continued, we want to publicly acknowledge that we were completely wrong. Our mom didn't need care. She needed us to believe in her. She didn't need to withdraw from life. She needed a new opportunity to shine. Robert began to cry as he spoke. Mom, forgive us for being so blind. Forgive us for not seeing all the potential you had within you. Forgive us for underestimating you. As he finished his speech, he came over to hug me. It was the first time in many years that I had seen him cry. Son, I said, you made the decisions you thought were right with the information you had at that moment. I can't forgive you because there's nothing to forgive, but I can thank you. He looked at me in surprise. Yes, for allowing me to discover how far I could go. If you hadn't taken me to the nursing home, I would never have developed this program. I would have never come to know my true purpose in life. It's true. Although the initial abandonment was painful, it was necessary for my transformation. If I had continued living as a mother in need of attention, I would never have been able to develop my potential as a leader, innovator, and agent of social change. That night, upon returning to the shelter after the celebration, I sat on my bed to reflect on everything I had experienced. In 3 years, I went from being an abandoned woman engulfed in depression to becoming a nationally recognized public figure. However, beyond the external recognition, what truly mattered was the internal change. I had regained my self-esteem, my purpose, my passion for life. Hope, who at 83 years old remained my companion and best confidant. She asked me how I feel now that my children publicly recognize me. I feel complete, I replied, not because they recognize me, but because I had already recognized myself. In December 2021, I received an offer I never imagined. The federal government proposed that I take on the position of National Director of Active Aging Programs, with offices in Mexico City and a quite respectable salary. It was an amazing opportunity to expand our program nationally and impact the lives of millions of older adults across the country. But accepting meant leaving Guadalajara, abandoning the shelter that had become my home, and saying goodbye to my companions who had become my true family. For weeks, I reflected on the proposal. I spoke with Hope, with Mr. Arnold, with Mrs. Shelley. I also talked with my children, who provided their unconditional support for whatever decision I chose to make. Ultimately, I chose to decline the offer. My place was in Guadalajara with the community I had built in the shelter, coordinating the program that had given rise to my work. I communicated to the federal official who made the proposal that it was an honor to be considered for that position, but I had already found my place in the world. My work is done here with this community from this base. By 2022, the Wisdom in Action program was operating in all 32 states of Mexico, with over 5,000 seniors serving as volunteer educators and more than 80,000 children benefiting from the workshops. We had achieved what seemed like an impossible challenge, changing the social perception of older adults. We were no longer viewed as burdens or obstacles, but as valuable resources for education and community development. However, the most significant change occurred on a personal level. At 68 years old, I was a completely transformed woman compared to the one who had arrived at the nursing home 4 years prior. I felt confident, proud of my achievements, and aware of my worth, regardless of what others thought. My children now visited me frequently, but the dynamic had changed drastically. They no longer came out of obligation or guilt. They came because they genuinely enjoyed my company, were proud of me, and wanted to hear about my projects and adventures. My grandchildren, who had barely known me before, now saw me as an inspiring figure. Several of them began to get involved as junior volunteers in our program, helping to organize workshops and activities. The house they had sold when they brought me to the nursing home no longer evoked nostalgia. The nursing home had transformed into my true home, not just because I had been left there, but because it was the place where I experienced a new beginning. Currently, as I share this narrative, I am 71 years old and still residing in the Guadalupana residence, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is my operations center, the base from which I organize a program that has impacted the lives of thousands of people across Mexico and in several countries in Latin America. Every morning I wake up at 5:30, not because the nurses at the nursing home require it, but because I have scheduled video calls with program coordinators in Colombia and Argentina. At 7:30, I have breakfast with the residents of the nursing home, planning the week's activities. At 9 I head to my office in downtown Guadalajara, where I work with a team of 15 people responsible for coordinating programs across the country. On Fridays, I continue to conduct workshops at the Benito Juarez Primary School, where it all began. The children at that institution already know me as teacher María Elena, and several of those who attended our early workshops are now in high school, but they still come to visit me to tell me about their progress in their studies. Mr. Arnold, who is now 78 years old, continues to be the coordinator of the music workshops. Miss Shelley, at 76, runs a sewing training program for women in vulnerable situations. Hope, my lifelong roommate, has taken on the role of coordinator for literacy programs for older adults. All of us continue to live in the nursing home, but no longer as passive residents awaiting death. We are an active community, a network of mutual support, a chosen family sharing a purpose and a passion for life. My children and I have rebuilt our relationship on new foundations. Robert, who is currently 49, became so committed to our program that he decided to leave his job at the insurance company to start a consultancy focused on active aging programs. He works directly with me, and we have built a very strong professional relationship, in addition to our family ties. Alexander still lives in Monterrey, but visits me once a month, always bringing projects and ideas to expand our program using technology. His expertise in systems has been key to creating our digital platform. Gabrielle separated from Frank 2 years ago. It seems that her marriage wasn't as idyllic as it was presented, and she currently lives in Guadalajara with her 2 daughters. She is the communications and public relations coordinator for our program, and it's amazing to see her passion as she works on something that truly matters to her. My grandchildren, who are now between 12 and 24 years old, see me in a completely different light. I am no longer the grandmother in the nursing home, but the grandmother who appears on television, the one who knows the governor, the one who is making an impact on the world. However, the most valuable thing beyond external recognition is the relationship I have cultivated with myself. At 71, I have finally discovered that my worth as a person does not depend on the opinions of others, not even on those of my own children. My value comes from within, from my ability to contribute, create, and make a difference in the world. The most significant lesson I've learned over the years is that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, discover new talents, and find a new purpose in life. The suffering from the abandonment I experienced at first became the best opportunity I've had to understand what I'm truly capable of. When older adults ask me how to overcome abandonment by their families, I always tell them the same thing. Don't wait for others to give you value. Look for it within yourself. Don't wait for others to give you a purpose. Create it yourself. Don't wait for others to come to your rescue. Rescue yourself. The Wisdom in Action program has evolved beyond being just my personal project. It has transformed into a social movement that is changing the perception and treatment of older adults in Latin America. We have shown that aging is not a disease needing treatment, but a stage of life full of potential and opportunities. Every day I receive letters and messages from elders who have transformed their lives by participating in our program. women who had lost hope and are now leading cooking workshops, men who felt useless and now teach traditional crafts to eager young learners, grandparents who were forgotten by their families and are now admired as teachers and mentors in their communities. A few weeks ago, a 74-year-old woman from Oaxaca wrote to me, "Mrs. María Elena, thanks to your example, I realized that my children's rejection was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter. I am now running a nutrition education program in my community, and I feel more useful and happier than ever in my life." Those letters confirm every day that we have done something right, that it's worth fighting for, and that every day spent working on this program is an investment in the dignity and potential of millions of older adults. My story is not just about a woman who was abandoned in a nursing home and found a new life. It's about the ability we all possess at any age to transform suffering into strength, loneliness into service, and rejection into a new opportunity to shine. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to discover unknown talents. It's never too late to find your true purpose in life. It's never too late to show the world and yourself what you are truly capable of achieving. Believe in yourself. Don't wait for others to rescue you. Save your own life. The Wisdom in Action program has evolved from being just my initiative into a social movement that is transforming the perception and treatment of older adults in Latin America. We have demonstrated that aging is not seen as an illness to be cured, but as a life stage filled with possibilities and opportunities. Every day I receive letters and messages from seniors who have changed their lives by participating in our program. Women who had lost all hope are now leading cooking workshops. Men who felt useless are now teaching traditional trades to young people eager to learn. Grandparents who had been sidelined by their families are now valued as educators and mentors in their communities. A few weeks ago, a 74-year-old woman from Oaxaca wrote to me, "Mrs. María Elena, thanks to your example, I understood that the rejection from my children was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter. Now I coordinate a nutritional education program in my community, and I feel more useful and happier than ever in my life." Those letters reaffirm to me every day that we are making the right decisions, that it is worth continuing to fight, and that every day of work on this project is an investment in the dignity and potential of millions of older adults. My story isn't just about being a woman who was abandoned in a nursing home and found a new life. It's about the ability we all have at any age to turn suffering into strength, loneliness into service, and rejection into a new opportunity to shine. It's never too late to start anew. It's never too late to discover skills you didn't know you had. It's never too late to find your true purpose in life. It's never too late to show the world and yourself what you are really capable of. To all the women listening to me, especially those who are around my age or approaching it, I want to share the following. You are not a burden to society. You are not a burden to your loved ones. They are living libraries filled with wisdom, experience, and knowledge that the world yearns for fervently. Don't let anyone, neither your children, society, nor even yourselves, make you believe that your usefulness has come to an end. Your potential is just beginning. The brightest years may still be ahead if you have the courage to claim your power, your purpose, and your place in the world. And if your families have left you just as my children left me, remember this. You can create new families, find new goals, and build new lives. Abandonment can be painful, but it can also offer liberation. It may be the opportunity you needed to rediscover who you truly are without being bound by others' expectations. At 71, living in a retirement home, I am happier, more successful, and prouder of myself than I ever was as a devoted mother and wife. I discovered my true identity at 68, and since then, every day is a new adventure, a new challenge, and a new opportunity for growth. So please, my dears, never give up. My dears, don't accept that your story has come to an end. Don't let others dictate what your place in the world should be. Your place is wherever you choose to be, and you can redefine it as many times as you wish, regardless of your age. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to write your own narratives of transformation and empowerment. And remember, it's always time to start the most significant chapter of your lives.